You're a billionaire. You get to pick one, a casino or an airline. Most people pick the casino in about 2 seconds. The house always wins, right? Free money machine, neon lights, easy math. Here's the problem. The man who arguably built modern Las Vegas, the guy who constructed the world's largest hotel 3 separate times, also tried to run an airline. Twice. And when historians tell his story, the casinos are the triumph. The airline is the footnote nobody mentions at the funeral. So if casinos are the obvious winner, why do some of the smartest investors alive keep circling back to airlines anyway? Why does Warren Buffett, a man who has avoided almost every bad bet in 50 years of investing, keep getting talked into buying airline stock over and over, even after swearing he never would again? Something doesn't add up. And by the end of this video, you're going to realize the obvious answer to this question is almost completely wrong, for a reason that has nothing to do with gambling, and everything to do with what these businesses actually are. Here's the tension we're going to sit with for the next 15 minutes. One of these businesses has a mathematical edge built into every single transaction. The other loses that same bet, on average, every few years, for over a century straight. And yet, stick with me, the guaranteed business has buried billions of dollars in the New Jersey sand within 2 years of opening its doors. And the loser business has quietly made a small number of very disciplined people extraordinarily rich. Both of those things are true. We need to find out why. Let's say you actually want to do this. Not fantasize, buy. Getting into the casino business doesn't start with a poker table. It starts with a piece of paper. In most U.S. states, a gaming license alone can run anywhere from $500,000 in a small regional market to over $50 million just for the right to operate on the Las Vegas Strip. That's before you've poured a single foundation. And once you're in, the state doesn't let go. Compliance teams, background checks, surveillance systems that never blink, regulatory upkeep alone can cost a mid-sized property $1 to $2 million a year, every year, just to stay legal. Now compare that to buying your way into aviation. You don't need a license to build a casino for the size of a football field. You need something arguably harder to get, a slot. An actual landing and takeoff slot at a major airport, which in cities like London or New York can be worth more, per pair, than a fleet of aircraft. Then you need the aircraft themselves. A single wide-body jet can run north of $300 million brand new. Then pilots. Then fuel contracts. Then insurance that assumes, statistically, something eventually goes wrong. 2 completely different toll booths. Same destination, an industry that will now watch your every move for the rest of your career. But here's the twist, the entry cost was never actually the hard part for either business. The hard part is what happens after you're already in the room. Let's talk about the number that convinces almost everyone the casino wins outright, the house edge. On a slot machine, the casino keeps somewhere between 2 and 15 cents of every dollar wagered, forever, by mathematical law. Not luck. Law. On blackjack, even at its most player-friendly, the house still keeps around half a cent to 2 cents of every dollar, and that's assuming the player is playing perfectly, which almost nobody does. Compare that to an airline seat. Once that plane pushes back from the gate with an empty middle seat, that seat is gone. Unsold. Unlike a casino table, there is no next hand. There's no house edge recalculating in your favor 5 minutes from now. The revenue for that seat just evaporated into the sky. So the casino wins, right? Case closed. Not so fast, because here's what almost nobody realizes when they look at a casino's income statement. Gambling might not even be the main business anymore. Take MGM Resorts' 9 Las Vegas properties, laid out in their own 2019 disclosure. Their casino floors generated $1.3 billion in gaming revenue that year. Their rooms, restaurants, retail, and shows brought in $4.5 billion. Read that again. The casino made over 3 times more money renting hotel rooms and selling steak dinners than it did on the games it's named after. The house edge is real. But at a modern mega resort, it's not the engine anymore. It's the loss leader that gets you through the door. That's only half the story, though, because if gambling isn't really where casino money comes from anymore, then the entire guaranteed math argument for owning a casino just stopped being the reason to own one. Which means we need to ask a much scarier question. What actually determines whether either of these businesses makes money at all? Think of an airline seat like a fruit stand at 11 p.m. Whatever didn't sell today is worthless tomorrow morning. That single fact is the whole airline industry, compressed into one sentence. Airlines are structurally trapped between two walls that never move. On one side, enormous fixed costs, planes, fuel, unionized labor, insurance, that exist whether the flight has 40 passengers or 400. On the other side, a product that can't be stored, can't be marked up freely because your competitor is one search result away and evaporates the second the doors close. That combination produces one of the strangest numbers in all of business. In 2025, the global airline industry is expected to earn a net profit margin around 3.9%. On a full flight, after fuel, after crew, after maintenance, after landing fees, the average airline keeps about $7.90 in profit per passenger. That's less than the price of a large coffee and a muffin. You could fly across an ocean, and the airline's entire take-home profit from your seat wouldn't cover your snack at the gate. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because that thin margin isn't a bad year. It's the average, stretched across a century of data, through booms, wars, oil shocks, and a pandemic that grounded the entire planet. One of the most successful investors alive built an entire piece of his reputation warning people away from this exact math. In 1968, a college dropout turned World War II bomber pilot named Kirk Kerkorian started quietly buying up shares of an airline called Western Airlines. He built a large enough stake to take control of its board. Around the same time, he was also making his first real move into Las Vegas, buying land, building hotels, chasing the same instinct that made him rich flying second-hand planes across the Atlantic as a young man. For a while, both bets looked live. But by 1976, Kerkorian had sold out of Western entirely, stepping away from day-to-day control. He wasn't done with aviation, though. Over a decade later, in 1987, he tried again, funding a glamorous new venture called MGM Grand Air, an all-first-class luxury carrier flying the wealthy between New York and Los Angeles. Leather seats, gourmet meals. A private club in the sky. It failed. Quietly and completely, one more name added to a graveyard that, since 1978, has swallowed well over 100 airline bankruptcies in the U.S. alone. Pan Am, TWA, Eastern, U.S. Airways, twice. Meanwhile, the casino side of Kerkorian's life took a wildly different path. He built the International Hotel in 1969, the largest hotel in the world at the time. Then the original MGM Grand in 1973, the largest hotel in the world again. Then, in 1993, a third MGM Grand, the largest hotel in the world for a third time. By the year 2000, at 82 years old, he outbid his old rival Steve Wynn and bought the Mirage, the Bellagio, and Treasure Island in a single $4.4 billion deal, making him the undisputed king of the Las Vegas Strip. Same man. Same era. Same appetite for risk. One industry made him a legend whose name is still on hotel towers today. The other made him a footnote in aviation history books, filed under luxury carriers that didn't survive the decade. If you stopped the story right here, you'd walk away thinking the answer is obvious. Everything changes here. Because here's what the Kerkorian story conveniently leaves out. Not every casino wins, and not every casino owner is Kirk Kerkorian. In April 2012, on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, a glass tower called Revel opened its doors. It cost $2.4 billion to build, more than almost any casino resort in American history at the time. It had its own power plant. A total smoking ban to attract a younger, wealthier crowd. Celebrity headliners. Sweeping ocean views. Every ingredient of a Kerkorian-style triumph. It never turned a profit. Not one quarter. Not once. 2 years later, buried in over $1 billion of debt, Revel filed for bankruptcy, its second trip to bankruptcy court in as many years. By the time it finally closed for good in September 2014, more than 3,000 people lost their jobs in a single week, and the building that cost $2.4 billion to construct would eventually sell for $200 million. Roughly 8 cents on every dollar it took to build. The house edge didn't save Revel. The mathematical certainty of gambling profit, the exact thing that's supposed to make casinos bulletproof, meant nothing against a debt load the property could never outrun and a design that misjudged its own customers from day one. So now we have a casino that lost almost everything, and an airline mogul who somehow made a fortune anyway. The math is starting to feel less like destiny, and a lot more like something else entirely. At this point you might be thinking, fine, it's not the industry, it's the operator. Good operators win in either business. Bad operators lose in either business. Simple. Except that's not quite true either, because the ceiling and the floor are not remotely symmetrical between these two industries, and this is the part almost nobody accounts for. Warren Buffett didn't lose money running a casino. He lost money, repeatedly, across 4 different decades, just from touching airline stock. In 1989, Berkshire Hathaway put over $350 million into U.S. Airways preferred shares. Within 5 years, the airline had lost $2.4 billion and suspended Berkshire's dividend entirely. In 2016, Buffett tried again, buying roughly 10% stakes across American, Delta, United, and Southwest. He held for 4 years. Then, within weeks of a global pandemic grounding air travel, he sold the entire position at a steep loss, and said afterward that the world for airlines had changed in a way he couldn't yet predict. This is a man who once joked he kept a hotline to call whenever he felt the urge to buy an airline stock again, so someone could talk him down before he made the same mistake a 3rd time. He made it a 4th time in 2026 anyway. That's not a story about one bad operator. That's 100 years of some of the most disciplined capital on earth walking into the same trap, again and again, because the industry structure, not its management, keeps setting the trap. Casinos don't have that same gravitational pull toward failure. When a casino fails, like Revel, it's almost always a story about one specific, avoidable mistake: too much debt, the wrong location, a product nobody asked for. When airlines fail, it happens so often, to so many different management teams, in so many different decades, that failure starts to look less like a mistake and more like the default outcome the entire industry is fighting against every single day, forever. Here's the number that finally explains why the industries feel so different, even when both have brilliant people running them. The airline industry's return on invested capital, the actual return investors get for the money and risk they put in, has spent most of the last 2 decades sitting below the cost of that capital. In plain terms, even in a good year, the industry as a whole barely earns enough to justify the money poured into it. Investors would often have been better off putting that same money into an index fund than doing nothing. A well-run casino resort, by contrast, isn't fighting that headwind. Once the debt is sized correctly, which is exactly where Revel failed, a casino resort behaves less like a gamble and more like a hotel with better margins bolted onto the lobby. Predictable room rates. Predictable food and beverage. A house edge that never has an off day, layered under all of it like a stone foundation. That's the real answer hiding underneath the entire question. It was never casino versus airline. It's a business built on a foundation that mathematically favors you every single day versus a business built on a foundation that requires you to outrun physics, fixed costs, perishable inventory, and a commodity product, just to stay even. So, richer running a casino or richer running an airline? Strip away the neon and the wings, and the honest answer is this. A casino, run competently, is one of the most durable cash-generating machines in modern business, not because of the slot machines, but because it quietly transformed itself into a hotel and entertainment company with a mathematically rigged bonus feature attached. An airline, run just as competently, by just as smart a team, is still fighting a business model that has produced, in the words of the investor who studied it longest, essentially zero cumulative profit across its entire 100-year history. Kirk Kerkorian didn't get rich because he was a genius at reading airline balance sheets and a fool at reading casino ones. He got rich because he kept betting on the business where skill and good decisions actually get to compound, and he kept losing, cheerfully, small amounts on the business where even genius mostly just delays the inevitable. That's the twist this whole video was built on. It was never a fair fight. The casino wasn't winning because gambling has better odds than flying. It was winning because somewhere along the way, casinos stopped being in the gambling business, and airlines never got the chance to stop being in the airline business. You don't own a casino to beat the house. You own it to become the house. The airline never gets that option. It just keeps flying, hoping, this year, the math finally breaks its way,